Another way to understand the transitions that we're going through and the mind of the lean leader is to look at this chart. And I swear for 35 years or so, I've had a chart like this that had sort of the old and the new, on the left and the right side, the traditional and the where we're going leader, right? I've used different terms for it, but we can certainly use the term the lean leader now in terms of the mindset and the assumptions of the lean leader. And it begins with this idea of authority and the assumption of having control. You know, if you were Lord Nelson on the British ship of war, you asserted control because you in fact had superior knowledge and you needed people to obey very instantaneously. That's not the world of our corporations today unless the building is burning down, unless we're in crisis. Increasingly now the task of the leader is to gain commitment and creativity. And it takes a different style. It takes more listening than telling, right? And that's another, aspect of it. The old-fashioned leader, the authoritarian leader, just assumed superior knowledge, so he told you. He gave orders. Where increasingly the modern leader now is humble. The leader knows that he or she doesn't necessarily have all the answers or all knowledge, and is seeking, seeking from those doing the work. This is, at the Gemba, the people doing the work. You're listening to them, and there's a humility. You must be humble in order to have that mindset. For most of our life, we made objects. We made things. Most of our life on this planet is what I meant to say. We've made things, right? We're not making things for the most part. Sure, some people are still manufacturing. That's about 30% of our economy. 70% of our economy is not making things. They're making service. They're serving people. They're writing software. They're delivering things. They're serving people. And that requires a different mindset, because if you're simply object-oriented, you can see it, you can touch it, you can measure it, and you can say, no, it's out of spec, it's in spec. Well, when you're talking about things that are about service, well, they're just not so objective. Objects are objective, right? Things that are about service, they have a different quality and they require a different sensibility on the part of the manager. The old way, there was an emphasis on planning. And today, rather than this sort of the agile, which is derived from lean idea, rather than having long-range plans and trying to stick to those plans, no, we have some general idea about a long-range plan, but what we recognize is that as we go down the path, we're constantly experimenting and adjusting based on what we're learning. So we're in a continual learning process, and that kind of goes along with humility, right? In the old world, there was an assumption that if you had formal knowledge, formal learning, you had the answers. Good luck. Today, because in fact things change so fast, whatever you learned at a university or in some training class may not be right today in your workplace, on your shop floor, because in fact there is learning going on every day, and you assume that learning is going on every day, and it's your job to assure that that learning is going on every day. In the old model, there was a tendency to blame people, as I've said before. In the new model, we don't blame people, we blame the process, and we fix the process rather than worrying so much about whether the person is the right person. We develop the person. In the old model, there was a tendency to enjoy power and sort of to relish in power. And it's a major, I'll say a spiritual change, to enjoy and relish the idea of serving others, serving customers, serving your suppliers, serving your shareholders, serving your employees. We really must be servant leaders if we are going to be successful today. In the past, we tended to rely on staffs to improve. We had an HR staff and an engineering staff and a quality staff and all those folks. And increasingly in lean culture, you're less relying on those people. Those people may have expertise that is enabling the people on the floor, the people doing the work, to engage in the improvement process rather than simply relying on the experts. We're relying on the people doing the work to become expert. We used to assume that if you were promoted to a position, you were promoted there because you could make decisions. We assumed individual decision making. Today, sure, there's some times when there's still individual decision making, but increasingly it's not individual decision making, it's consensus reaching, developing team decision-making, collective wisdom out of the team. It's a different skill. It's a skill we all need to develop. In the old model, we assumed company walls. We assumed borders. We built walls to keep out the barbarians, and we had ownership within those walls. Walls increasingly are irrelevant. They're irrelevant in the larger society, and they're irrelevant between company A and company B and company C because processes flow through those walls. Almost no company does it all themselves. They rely on suppliers and they feed somebody else, right? So there's that flow, and we must think wall-less, boundary-less about the process. We used to assume there was a right answer to everything, a right answer and a wrong answer. We don't assume that anymore. We assume there's the best answer that we know today, but by the time we implement it tomorrow, we'll probably discover a better answer, right? Our thinking used to be dominated by the desire to move up the ladder. Vertical organization, vertical progress as we moved up, vertical decision-making up and down the ladder. Increasingly, that vertical is becoming less and less important, and what's more and more important is how we collaborate on each side, right? Because processes flow horizontal. Processes don't flow up and down. They flow left to right. So increasingly, we have to develop relationships. We have to have good relationship skills with our customers and our suppliers, and we have to think about the horizontal organization that is around that process and designing that. We're going to talk about that in the next section. So those are some critical elements of the leader's mind, I believe. Thank you.